Hi, everyone. My name is Gerald. Welcome to JAMstack NYC. It's been a long time. It's been over 2 years since we've done an event. We're really excited to get back started, and thank you to the Postman crew for helping making that happen. We've been talking about it for a while, and now we're all here. So Bud actually started this, what year?
2014.
2014 as the new dynamic, and then rebranded in 2017?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, rebranded to 2017 to JAMstack NYC when the movement started blowing up and everyone started talking about it. So one thing I like to do for every one of these is just ask, how many people here know what JAMstack is? It's always fascinating to me the people that don't know about JAMstack. So this is the original definition of JAMstack. I say the original because there's been some evolution, there's been a lot of conversation, but originally it was just about JavaScript, APIs, and markup. And it was this idea that you decouple your backend from your front end, and by doing so, you increase performance and security, and maybe even have a better impact on the world. So this definition has potentially evolved depending on your school of thought. A lot of people think just decoupling is enough. Some people think that pre-rendering and shipping markup, HTML, and minimal JavaScript is the way. So for some, React and all of this is JAMstack. Pre-rendering on the edge, decoupled, separate APIs, API ecosystem, that's all JAMstack. But some of us believe in a slightly more pure definition where you should try and pre-render as much of the page as you can and then hydrate and only use as much JavaScript as you can. I think that both are valid definitions, and however you JAMstack, welcome. So I do want to say a thank you. Thank you to Microsoft for helping host us, and thank you so much to Postman for co-hosting, for helping organize, for getting a bunch of you here, and for coming and speaking. So thank you. I do want to shout out to the new dynamic. This is the community that existed and came up along with the JAMstack NYC Meetup. Most of this happens on the new dynamic Slack. A lot of us are already there. Bud is there, I'm there, we chat every day. It's a very welcoming community where you can come, you can ask questions, you can learn, you can find out news, and just connect with other like-minded people. So check it out, and also go to jamstack.nyc, which we need to keep updated, but that's where you'll find a bunch of good info. Next, I want to mention our code of conduct. It is on jamstack.nyc if you want to read the extended version, but we just want to make sure that everyone understands that we believe everyone should feel safe when they come here, they should feel comfortable being themselves, and that no one should make them feel otherwise. So, for tonight's event, we have 2 talks. The first is going to be by Bud Parr, who's going to talk about measuring and the impact of your site's carbon footprint. This is really fascinating. I can't wait for that. Bud actually runs an agency called The New Dynamic, and he's been in the JAMstack game since before JAMstack was a word. Following that is going to be another talk by Claire Froelich, and she's going to show us how to build a Badgr API. And Claire is a curriculum engineer for student programs at Postman. So, Bud.
Good.
Oops. Are you going to use that?
Yeah, I'm going to use this one. And I'm going to scoot you over here, though. And maybe that will come up. There we go. All good here? Okay. So as Gerald said, I am Bud Parr, and I run the JAMstack Meetup here in New York City, which I've been doing since 2014. I've been doing that because I love lightweight, composable architectures and all the benefits that come along with that. Somewhere along the line, I became obsessed with things like web performance, and then most recently, I've become kind of obsessed or nutty about my own environmental impact. So I haven't given a speech like this, any kind of talk, in at least 2 years now. So Forgive me if I feel a little bit rusty, but the fact is I don't even like public speaking. Maybe nobody does, but I don't like it. I don't like doing this, but I've been doing it since 2014. Only when I really feel like there's something I gotta say, when it's necessary. And this is why. Like probably most of you, I'm a big believer in technology to solve the world's problems. I think that technology can bridge gaps between people. I think that it can do a lot of things more efficient, say, rather than jumping in your big car, going to the air-conditioned mall and buying your clothes, you can buy that online, right? And have it delivered to your doorstep much more efficiently. But I always kind of took it for granted, that one was using a lot of energy and another would have been less. But I never really thought about the impact of what we were doing on the web until recently. So we all know that climate change is an issue. It's becoming ever more critical, and it feels a little hopeless, right? Because we know that, our politicians aren't doing anything about it. And it feels like our individual actions are just a small drop in a large, ocean of problems. But here's a little perspective, though. If you think about this, if you think about our industry that accounts for 4% of global CO2 emissions, that's about the same as the civil aviation industry. And for them to improve in that industry, they've got to come up with new fuels, reconfigure, multi-million-dollar planes and that sort of thing. We can have an impact just by making simple changes to our day-to-day workflow. So, and that's what I want to talk a little bit about. And I didn't really think that I could have much of an impact until I found this community, climateaction.tech. And it's populated full of all people in technology who are trying to solve these problems, who it's like the brightest minds figuring this stuff out. And they share a lot of resources there. And that kind of empowered me. And everything I know about this topic so far, I learned from people in that community. So first off, we have to measure what we're doing. And we have to, importantly in this case, because it can be a little bit confusing, we have to kind of understand what we're measuring, right? So what factors influence a website? And this could be a web application or a standard website or anything like that. What are the factors that go into this? So it's a little bit complicated, but it starts with something very basic, something that we're all very aware of, is data transfer. You can see that in DevTools in your browser. So, that's the starting point for this. And obviously, the more you're transferring, the more impact you're going to have. But when we're measuring this, we measure it on first-time basis and repeat basis for repeat visitors and that sort of thing. And then we convert that into what that means in terms of CO2. And then we have to think a little bit about how that energy, what the actual impact is, right? So we all have our devices. There's a cost, a carbon cost, if you will, to produce these devices, and a cost when you get rid of them, to recycle them and that sort of thing. And then, of course, there's the cost of running the device. There's energy that it takes to keep it charged up and run it every day, as we do. So then we have to think about getting data to and from the device. So that would be all the routers that are around the world, transferring data here and there. And then lastly, we have to think about all the servers where the data resides at. And not only just those servers, I mean, these are massive data farms. This is probably one of the biggest parts, these massive server farms, but also keeping them cool and that sort of thing, and their energy impact. So what are the tools that we're using to measure our carbon output? So the first one is websitecarbon.com. This site was started some years ago. It's an established site, and they've cycled through several iterations. So it's really honed in on and getting as accurate data as you possibly can. And it's also designed nicely. It's very usable for people, for a non-technical person to kind of come and have a sense of, oh, you can't see it, but this is Allbirds, who is actually supposed to be a very, carbon forward company, but maybe they can do a little bit better there. But anyway, so the site is very attractively designed and kind of gives you some reference points so that you can kind of understand what this actually means in terms of energy. And actually, in some ways, like 9 trees, that might be actionable for you, right? There's another one, if you're a developer, that you might feel a little more comfortable with, which I like. It's called Beacon. And you can change some of the data points to measure your total carbon output over a course of a year by using an accurate number for visitors and whether those visitors are new and returning. And then importantly, you can see down here that we get a breakdown of, what's using the most energy, right? And here is obviously 63, scripts that are using a lot of energy. So that's another one. EchoGrader will feel familiar to those of you who use Lighthouse. It's very prescriptive. It gives you a lot of things that you can do to go through and improve your site right on the page. So it doesn't just say, you're using energy you need to improve. It tells you exactly what you can do. And this one, I think, is great. It's called Are My Third Parties Green.com. And so not only does it tell you, okay, you're making a lot of requests, which is important in and of itself, but it tells you about those requests to see if those are served from green hosts, right? So in this case, they're not. So I think that's really an important piece of the puzzle. And then there are a couple of programmatic options. Sitespeed.io is a open source suite of tools that you can use, and they have a plugin for sustainability. And then CO2.js is also the JavaScript that runs many of these other sites. So these tools have evolved a lot over the years. They've fine-tuned, and CO2.js is probably where you want to go if you want to be doing this programmatically. So what do we do with this information now that we've calculated our carbon impact? Well, it's not a pretty picture. So this is the use of assets over the last 10 years, and you can see that it has not improved. A lot of us who've been talking about web performance over the years see this and get a little sad. The web is getting more complex and more bloated every day. So there's definitely work that we can be doing here. But I think in the case of carbon, we're going to see a lot more. If you work for a company, you're going to have a lot more pressure to do something about this situation, because now even the SEC is requiring a level of transparency from companies, and they have these different scope levels of what they have to do, report in terms of their energy impact. And a company's website is part of the Scope 3 reporting requirements. So this is something that everybody's going to be aware of all the way through a business. And I think also, Google highlights companies that are green on their search results and that sort of thing. And if anybody can start to influence behavior of people who own websites, it's probably Google and the SEC. So now we've measured our footprint, and we kind of need to think about, what we want to do about it. The first thing that we're seeing right now is a period where people are creating low carbon websites. This feels a little to me like when mobile was first a thing. We had M.dot websites, a special website just off into the side that was just for mobile. Some of those exist now, but it was a thing for a while, and everybody was doing that. It was really hard. That was before we had, websites. I forgot the name for it, but websites that move up and down when you were, depending on what device you're on. So this is a great effort, and they're doing a lot of information on here. But I kind of feel like nobody's really going to choose to use this off of instead of their regular website, which is full of pretty pictures and it's easy to navigate and that sort of thing. And you can see here that the UX on this is just terrible. Nobody's going to use this. But from these experiments has arisen a set of rules. And I don't actually like to think of them as rules, but more aspirations, right? Or guidelines, or even considerations, a starting point. Not all of them are realistic, particularly in a business sense. I mean, I have a client who, does nothing but make videos. We are, of course, going to have videos on our website. But if we take these elements, and I'm not going to go into all of them right now, that's beyond the scope of what we're trying to do tonight. But if we take each of these and we start to think about how we can influence them, our impact is going to be better, right? So that's a starting place, and like I said, an aspirational starting point. But we are seeing some creativity, right? So this is a VW site. You can't see the thing because I guess the screen, but this is a site by Volkswagen, and you can see that this is ASCII art. And if you go to the actual live website, it's pretty nice. It's really well done. I found myself looking, Googling like how to make ASCII art, but it's really nicely done. But to my mind, it's the starting of creativity, the starting of ways to be a little bit more thoughtful about what we're creating, right? From there, and I wanted to mention too that I saw recently a blog post, and I'll have links to all of this stuff that I can share with people, but a blog post on the AWWW Awards, whatever that site is, about all the alternative ways that you can create visualizations that are less heavy than what people have been doing in the past. So I think really it just requires a certain amount of thoughtfulness and starting from a lower place and building up from based on what you need. And then, of course, when we're thinking about carbon output, we're starting, like I said, with the point of data transfer, right? So the rules here are the same rules that we try to use for improving our websites and performance. So we have tools like web page test that can, and I don't mean to call out Allbirds, that was a little bit random, but they could do a little bit better job on their website. But we can use tools like web page tests that will allow us to go in and they'll suggest very specific things that you can do, and you can test them right on their website. It's a fantastic resource. So you can use this to improve your website's performance, and by doing so, you'll improve your site's carbon output. Same thing goes with Lighthouse, but I think this is a little bit more, more impactful. And of course, I mean, this is the JAMstack Meetup. So, by pre-rendering your site, you are saving, logic being run on every page load on the server. So I'm going to leave that there, but that is definitely the way to go. Pre-rendering when you can, as much as you can, is definitely a good thing to be doing. And then lastly, and this is critical, is to choose a green host. Unfortunately, that's a little bit complicated because even a host that says, well, I'm green, they may or may not be green. There's a thing called greenwashing that you've probably heard about and that sort of thing. And it might be that they're planting some trees or something like that. That doesn't really mean that they're green. And it's further complicated by the fact that any host today has probably data centers in different places. And each of those data centers has an energy mix that's based on the local sources of energy. So there's things that they can control and things that they can't. And there are actually very few data centers today, like in Iceland or someplace like that, where they're really, 100% run on renewable energy. So a lot of this is a mix of offsets and pushing towards renewable energy, but also being efficient. So Google, and fortunately, I think that a lot of the big players are doing this, right? So Google Cloud allows you to pick a data center in their control panel that they'll report on, which is more green or not, and they'll let you switch to and from different data centers. And you can do it in different times. It's very active. You can do it right there. Companies like Cloudflare are allowing you to block unnecessary bots. So it's like this idea of catching little pieces of efficiency wherever you can. Blocking bots can reduce sites traffic by a lot, but it's all unnecessary traffic. So people are handling this, but you need to actually choose a green host. I think there's the Green Web Foundation, lists many of them, but most of the hosts, if they are green, will say so, and they need to be held accountable. And everybody who's not needs to be. And I think that that's one area where we as a technology community can be vocal about our choices and let people know that that's important to us. I know that we host a lot of sites with Netlify, and they're partially green, and it's a little bit difficult for them because they use different infrastructure from different companies and that sort of thing. But people have been very vocal about it over the years, pushing them towards this and making sure that they know that it's important. So, and lastly, I think that it's really about being thoughtful, trying to find efficiencies wherever you can. I know at my firm, we've made a habit of reducing our builds. So we used to just, every time, we'd have a commit or something, who cares, it's a build. And we started to think about this, that we're using a lot of server resources all the time when we didn't need to. So we've cut back on that. And so it's about finding these little places of efficiency that you can and that will add up over time. And interestingly, I think this is kind of interesting. This is called the Jevons paradox, where you can actually make your site more efficient and end up outputting more carbon because more people are using your site. So, I mean, now that's, there are worse problems, right? But, it's kind of something to kind of think about in terms of what you're doing. But if you want to go that far, there are things that you can do. And the offset world has changed a lot over the years. It used to be, plant a tree someplace, and that's a very slow path to actually making a difference. But now there are a lot of companies who are seeking to do actual carbon removal from the atmosphere. And I think that can have a great impact. So here, this is one, it's blocking the name from the screen here. I'm sorry, but I think I have it listed in the slide, in the last slide. But I think that them and Stripe Climate is funding a lot of these carbon removal projects, and you can either do that. We do the Stripe's 1% thing, where we contribute our revenues towards funding carbon removal, but you can also just go and donate to it and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of opportunities for that if you want to try to go all the way with what you're doing. So here are most of the things that I talked about in the talk, and I can post these on Twitter or Meetup or what have you, or maybe on the YouTube. I would highly suggest, as a starting point, this course. It's very short, the Principles of Sustainable Software Engineering, that Microsoft has online. It's really informative, and whether you're a designer or a developer, it says software engineer, but it doesn't matter. It gives you kind of this basis of the things that I was talking about, where your climate impact comes from. So I highly recommend that, and I highly recommend climateaction.tech, which I mentioned before. They have a very active Slack. And that's it. I don't know if we have time for questions or what, but thank you.
Thank you, Bud. Do we have any questions?
Yeah.
Sure. You hinted at Scope 3 as a federal...
Oh, I was afraid somebody was going to ask me about that.
Okay, I'll shift from there.
Well, you can ask, but...
what have you seen succeed with development teams as far as adopting this? Because a lot of these websites look like I have to go enter the URL, I get some feedback.
Right.
That doesn't really... The programmatic approaches are probably better for websites that are being updated on a more regular basis.
Yeah.
Have you seen any kind of tooling or combination that is working for teams?
You mean in terms of measuring, or?
Right. So, like.
There's companies
right.
that are popping up. I don't have the names of them here, but I'm happy to give them to you. But like Google has funded a big company that's doing this, and they're popping up. Not just they're focused on a company's entire footprint, not just the web. And I don't know how they're managing that part, but yeah. So that's that is a going to be a very big business,
Right.
just measuring this,
Scope 3, I believe, is intended to include a measurement of the impact of the silicon.
Yeah,
So I think some of those things are still.
Yeah, it's all very comprehensive. It's actually pretty impressive. And I went to a conference with the Green Web Foundation, and they had Etsy there as kind of a poster child of, Scope 3 and measurement and getting right out in front of that and that sort of thing. And I talked to them about some of the things that they're doing, because it's not just their website, it's the whole cycle, about how to, for them, say, delivering and that sort of thing, and these are all, big things, but they're having to do it, right? They're having to do it because of the SEC.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. I'd love to take more questions, but I'm really excited for the next talk, and I'm going to ask you to go. So thank you so much, Bud. I feel seen because I'm wearing Allbirds, and you spent the whole time bashing me. I took that a little bit personally.
Yeah. I had to use somebody.
It's all good. I was excited to see my company's website was above 50th percentile, so we're doing something good. So next up, we have Claire Froelich, who's going to show us how to build a Badgr API, a Badgr badging, Badgr badging API.
All right.
So,
is the mic on, Kevin? All right. Great. How we all doing? Almost 7. It's really awesome to see everybody in person. This is the very first in-person meetup I've done since joining Postman, so really excited you all came out. I am going to share my screen. Which cable was that? This one?
that's power.
Okay.
So,
Maybe.
That's the one for the display. Yeah.
Let's see if that works.
Yeah.
Cross your fingers.
Sorry,
Things are happening.
I forgot to mention, there's going to be a short quiz and a giveaway at the end of this, so pay attention.
Yeah. Don't forget anything Bud said either. So as introduced, my name is Claire Froelich. I work at Postman on the student programs team. And my team's mission is basically, I like to compare it to cigarette companies trying to get youth to smoke cigarettes by giving out candy cigarettes. We try to get the youth interested in APIs in Postman before they graduate, but it feels a lot more ethical. And I'm passionate about doing it because I actually learned about APIs from Postman before joining Postman. And I'm going to be telling you why you might be interested in using Postman as part of your toolkit when working with the JAMstack. Quick refresher. I know Gerald brought this up earlier, but do you remember what the JAM in JAMstack stands for? What's the J? JavaScript. The A? APIs. And the M? Gotcha. Yeah, we got one person in the room that got them. It just so happens that Postman, the tool, is really good at working with all of these things. Just a quick temperature check, though. How many people in this room know what an API is? Most, but not all. Okay. Basically, API stands for Application Programming Interface, where interface is the important word. It's a way for code to talk to code, and it's how we build integrations and automations. And Postman is an API platform to help developers work with APIs, building them, testing them, sharing them, and poking at them. So again, Postman's good at working with all of these things. And to demonstrate that, I'll tell you a little case inside the company where we needed to build an application using Postman and JAMstack. So we have a lot of certifications for teaching about APIs at Postman. And lots of users are taking these certifications. The only problem is we're trying to give them a badge to prove that they've done it. We've been having to manually check that they've done it, passing some tests before we give them the badge. And that leads to a lot of people wondering, hey, where's my badge? Where's my badge? Because the manual process took a long time. So the solution for us was, how are we going to automate this badging process? We decided to build 2 serverless Lambda APIs in order to manage and automate the checking of people's submissions so we can give them a Badgr badge on a third-party platform. And Postman really helped out here, taking the API-first approach, as it's called. We'll talk about that in a second. but not only for building the backend, but also for building the client. And I'll show you how Postman can help with that. So these are some of the badges that we give out for various API skills. I'm going to share the slides at the end of this if you want to take a picture, so you can play around with those as well. But what is API-first development? Well, that's what Postman is really good at. So, the JAMstack, we know, like, if you work at Netlify, that's probably a good example of a JAMstack use case. Obviously, JAMstack pretty much came out of Netlify. You've got your backend decoupled from your front end. I needed to build a backend to manage these APIs. So where do you start? With API-first development, we start with what's called the schema. This is basically like the blueprint in a house. You don't live on the piece of paper that is the blueprint, but the blueprint defines how your house is going to look. And it's what everyone else looks at to build the walls, build the scaffolding, build interior decorating and everything. Same thing with APIs. Once you have a schema, it defines what your API looks like. And Postman can take that definition and help automate the generation of all your tests for your API, your documentation, so you can share it with your team. You can even generate a mock server, so you don't have to wait to deploy a server before your front-end team can start developing. And Postman will even generate actual server boiler code in like Express or Django. So it really helps you get up to speed fast when you're developing. And so yeah, life is short. Let Postman take the grunt work out of that for you. And maybe you're saying, well, I've never seen an API schema. How do I write one? Well, Postman will help you out here too. From the tool, if you go to the API section on the far left, you can generate a new API, and it's going to spit out some example schema. So if you've never seen a schema before, this is a great place to start and see, oh, okay, this is how you define a route on your API. You can copy and paste different parts of this. And if you need more inspiration, you can even search Postman's API network and find other existing APIs and see how their schemas look. And you can learn how to develop that way. Of course, there's documentation as well. So that was the first thing I did when I made these APIs, is I defined my schema so that I could generate the tests in the documentation. I ended up building 2 APIs. And we don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to talk very high level. Basically, we had an admin private API and then a public-facing claim API. The admin API lets me or people on my team define how a certain badge should be handled. For example, we have the Postman Student Expert training. I want anybody that submits a claim for that badge to have their Postman collection tested against some test that I made. So I defined that as the admin in the admin API. And then if somebody comes to the claim API that finished the training, they just submit their collection, and automatically it will be tested. If they pass, it will award them a badge in Badgr. So that completely removes the human from the picture. I'll skip over this, but basically it's just 2 lambdas that are sharing the same database. This is the less important part. I'd like to share more about how Postman is used to build these. I'm actually going to take you over into Postman now to show you what it looks like. How many of you have used Postman before? All right, so like 50% of the room. If you've never seen it before, it looks a little something like this. And right over here is our collections. What we're seeing right now is a workspace where we can have a bunch of collections that are just folders of API requests. And anybody on my team can come to this workspace and see these collections and learn how this API works. For example, here we have the admin API collection. And there's a bunch of folders inside that have all the requests in this REST API. And I can select one of these requests. Like this one is getting all of the badge handlers. This is what's, how we handle our badge claims. And I'll select an environment from up here for the admin gateway. This will give me all the credentials I need to access this API. And I'm just going to hit send to send this GET request to our API request URL. And so down in the bottom half is response land. And you can see if I scroll down here, there's a JSON response coming back from the API. It's all indented and colored. You can see all of the badge handlers that we have. So these are just defining how to handle a badge claim. All right. But the interesting part is the claim API. And this is where it gets a little bit JAMstacky. So if I open this other workspace, you'll see I've just created a special workspace to play around here today. I've actually forked the badging claim API from our other workspace, so I can play with it here. Forking in Postman works just like it does in GitHub. You get a copy of that collection, so you can play with it yourself. And you'll see I can look on the submit a claim request here. And Postman composes, your request. You can see all the pieces, the params, the auth, the body. This particular request just takes a body with 3 parameters. It wants the badge ID, the email, and the Postman collection JSON URL. So I can fill these out as a user and then hit send, and it's going to actually execute a claim for the badge. I can show you what this looks like really quickly. So actually, behind the scenes, Postman is using a library called handlebars.js that lets you interpolate variables into your collection URLs, or your request URLs, or even your request bodies. That's what's happening here. I've got a variable called badge ID, email, and Postman collection JSON URL, these orange ones. I can click on my collection and see the variables tab here and make a little more real estate because we're mega zoomed in. All right, and we can see these variables are defined here on our collection. So what's going to happen is when we send this request off, it's going to interpolate these values in the current value column right into our request. And so let's make a demo JAMstack email here. I'll save, go back to the submit a badge claim, and hit send. And I have to select the environment to make sure we have the right base URL. All right, and send. So it's going off to that Lambda that I built for the claim, probably waking it up because it takes a cold start. And we're getting back a message, a 424 error from the server. And I coded this to mean the submitted collection did not pass all of the tests. So this is all fine and great. It's a raw JSON response from the API. But if we're building like a JAMstack application, we probably want to present this another way to the user. So that's where Postman's visualizer feature comes in handy. You can actually take whatever API response was here, access that programmatically from the test tab of your request, and you can write some node code in here that's going to generate a template in the visualizer. And I wanted to show a really easy example, and I think we do have time, because I don't want to just bombard you with a barrage, a big wall of code for your first interaction with the visualizer. But I will show you an easier example. So have you ever heard of the Kanye REST API? It's just an API that gives you random Kanye West quotes. So we're going to call this collection a visualizer demo. And I like this API because it does exactly what it says it will do. And I've just copied the API URL. So I'll open our demo collection and add a new request. We'll call this get quote. And I'll paste the request URL into the URL bar and make it a get request. So just to give you an example of what comes back, we'll see an error. I don't think that's the right URL, my bad. There it is. Oops. Let's use the right URL. Yeah. I'm not very good at Macs, if you can't tell. All right. We're using the API URL now, and now we're getting a quote back, and hopefully these are appropriate. We'll see. But again, how can we take this raw JSON and have more fun with it in Postman? Look at the Visualize tab. It says nothing has been set yet. We can set this up very easily by heading into the Test tab. And I'll show you how you can easily template out some HTML. So first, I'm going to define a variable called template. And I'll use backticks, because it allows you to make new lines in your string. And we're just going to type some HTML. So first things first, the obligatory hello world. I'll save. And Postman gives you this special object called PM. And I'll say PM dot. And it gives us access to all of these Postman methods. One of the most important ones in this demo is going to be visualizer. This is how we can set our template into the visualizer. So it's just going to take our HTML and set it in our visualizer. I'll hit send again to trigger the test tab. And now we should see hello world down here. This is just an iframe displaying the HTML. So you can really play around with things. The cool part being you can dynamically inject data into your template. As a second parameter, we can add any variable, such as the quote. And if I want to pass the quote into our template, I'll have to grab it from the body. So the first thing I can do is make a variable, and I'll use the PM object again to access the response data. So I'll say pm.response.json. And this will give us the JSON parsed response from our API. And if you remember, we can check over here. We want to get quote, right? So I'll just drill const quote, pluck it right out of our body. Now we have a variable called quote that has whatever random quote came back from the API, and we're injecting it into our template. How do we use it in the template? With handlebars.js again. So here I'm just going to make a paragraph tag and double curly braces and drop the quote there. This will dynamically populate inside of our p tag. Maybe we can change the title of this to like wise words from, I guess he's called Ye now. And we'll send this off and check the visualize tab. And here we are. Wise words from Ye, speak God's truth to power. Every time that we send this request, it's going to dynamically populate the part we wrote as quote. And you can do anything in here that you would with regular HTML. I know the marquee thing used to be really popular in the 90s. You can even put CSS in here. So this is a great way if you're just going to try to scaffold out some components and you want to paste them into your website. You can do this right here from Postman. Or you could even use Postman as your front end, your client, and have your users access your API from the Postman Visualize tab. And the whole reason I brought all of this up is because this is exactly how I developed the front end of the badging API, because we are using it in a new training that's coming out soon inside of what's going to be called the Postman Academy. And I'll just show you the request that we just did over in the badging world. Actually, it was in the same workspace here. In this test tab, all I'm doing is conditionally rendering different templates based on what response came back from the API. If there were failed tests, it shows a table of all the failed tests, which is defined down here. And it's just populating the failed test data. So if you actually opened the Visualizer tab, you can see I'm making a table. It's a much more human-friendly way of reading this data. And this is exactly the code that I copied from Postman and pasted into our learning management platform. That it's just a static site. So if somebody comes along to our, let me just show you exactly where it's used. Preview this lesson. This is a preview of what is soon to be released, but in the Postman Academy, you'll have the opportunity to claim your API Fundamentals Student Expert badge. It has a form front end here, so they'll just enter their collection submission and then click Claim Your Badge, and it's going to make that API call and render the templates exactly like we saw before. So long story short, I had to build this in less than a week. And I also didn't know anything about the technologies I was using, like AWS Lambda was my first time, DynamoDB was my first time, so I had to teach myself those technologies on top of actually designing the API and deploying everything. So Postman really saved me here because I did API first design, I defined my schema, and I was able to build out a serverless backend very quickly. And not only that, but I was manually testing it as I go using the test collections that Postman made for me. I had to share it with my whole team so that they'd be able to use this API, but Postman automatically documents based off of your schema. So that was an easy task as well. And finally, I could really quickly scaffold out my HTML front end thanks to Postman's visualizer feature using the pm.visualizer feature, which is why I recommend Postman as one of the tools in your dev kit when you're working with the JAMstack. I know Netlify has serverless functions as well, and I've linked a couple of resources here if you'd like to continue learning, including a blog post by, I believe he still works at Netlify, but Jason Langsdorff. Yeah, he's still there. A great blog post about how to do serverless functions with Postman and Netlify and get you up to speed. And some other goodie links here as well. Last plug for my team. If anything excited you today about Postman the tool or learning more about APIs in general, we have on this link right here, links to get started with the Postman Student Expert Training, which will take you through how to use Postman to work with APIs, and you'll get a badge that will be automatically awarded. This one right here. It's a digital badge. Yeah, so you can take a picture of this link to get access to these slides. That will give you access to all the other links. And yeah, that was the abridged version of this, but I'm happy to answer any questions, maybe one before we jump into a quiz, if anybody had a question. Or everybody wants goodies. Quiz. All right. Okay. So we have a couple of quiz questions prepared for you because we have a couple of goodies for those that are the first to raise their hand and also get the answer correct. You will be walking home with a prized surprise. The first one might be for the Postman fans out there because it wasn't included in today's talk. But did you know that Postman has a CLI tool and it's named Newman? It's an open source tool. You can find the code on GitHub. Why do you think that this tool is named Newman? And we have an answer here. Did you say Seinfeld? Wow, so somebody knew the history right off the bat. Yes, our CLI tool for running Postman collections from the command line is named Newman, named after the postman in the American sitcom Seinfeld. So you'll be getting, what's that? Is it an Xbox choice? You have X socks. What's the other one, Joyce? We'll pass it. You get to choose one of these. Good choice. Good choice. All right, so one prize down. This one is for those of you that were paying attention today. Back in Bud's presentation, Bud presented about some of the ways that our websites impact our carbon footprint. Can you name one of those impact factors that is how we are impacting the environment with our websites? Even one.
Data transfer.
Data transfer. Is that correct? All right. Awesome. How many goods we got left? One little, one big. I won't tell you which this question is. So, all right. In the previous presentation, we talked a little bit about the visualizer and ways to access some special features using the test tab in Postman. There was a special helper object that we used. Wow, your mouth is faster than your hand, but I think that counts. But yes, the special helper object that you can use in the test tab of a Postman request is PM. So if you type PM dot, it's going to give you all the methods you can use, and you can do some pretty fancy things.
Make sure they raise their hand. This next one will not go well. Otherwise.
Right, this one, I'm going to call the first person that raises their hand. All right. All right, here we go. This also wasn't in today's presentation, so you might have to guess. What are the 5 patterns and protocols that Postman supports in its API platform? And if you need a hint as to what one of those might be, we've talked a lot about REST today. So anybody want to venture? Your hand is up first.
REST, GraphQL, WebSockets, Kafka, message broken.
Does. You got 2 more left. We got. Phone a friend. Okay, we've got 3 so far. We got REST, GraphQL. What was the other one you said? WebSockets. Can anybody come in and fill in the last 2? Nobody that works at Postman. You got to raise your hand, though.
You don't get penalized for guessing.
Yeah. Even if you just guess one protocol, you want to get it out there. Yeah.
So,
SOAP is another one. All right, we're almost there.
XML?
XML is not quite one. That's
Close. Good try.
how are we going to award this one? Whoever gets the
Has to be
last.
Somebody that raises their hand and gets the fifth one.
Yeah. Okay. There's one more out there in the wild, and since it's the hardest one to guess so far, apparently you get the special prize. Name any protocol.
You're close.
Can I tell them what it starts with?
But raise your hand.
Okay.
Only one.
You have to raise your hand, but it starts with a G.
Well, did you say something about documenting?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Someone already brought that up.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
These are request protocols. Yeah.
Oh.
gRPC.
Yeah.
So what are the five again?
Yeah.
gRPC, WebSocket, SOAP, REST, and GraphQL.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. You have won the legendary Postman bobblehead that people at Postman don't even have. So congratulations. Great. Well, that is all for our exciting quiz. I'll hand it back to Gerald then.
Thank you so much. Woo! That was great. I'm sorry you had to rush a little bit.
Oh, it's all good.
I really enjoyed that. I hope all of you did too. I want to say thank you. Sorry, we're in a bit of a rush to get you guys here soon. I do want to say thank you to every single one of you for coming. We appreciate you, and we hope you come to the next one. I want to say thank you, Microsoft, for hosting us, and Postman also for co-hosting and basically doing everything else. So we don't have our next event scheduled yet, but it will be on JAMstack NYC once it is scheduled. And if anyone is ever interested in speaking or anything, or doing a talk or a workshop, we would love to work with you. So just let us know, join our community, and talk to the Postman people where? If they want to reach out.
On Twitter or right here, right now is another great time. I will say we are hiring, so feel free to come up here and scan this QR code if you're interested in our open positions. And yeah.
Great. Thank you. That's it, everyone. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. That's great.